What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here and welcome to a new album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest studio album from one of the world's biggest and most influential bands of all time in rock history, the Rolling Stones, entitled Hackney Diamonds. This is the 24th British released and the 26th American released studio album in part of their discography. This is the follow-up to their covers album of Blue and Lonesome, which came out in 2016. And in terms of originality, this is the first Rolling Stones album in nearly 20 years since A Bigger Bang that came out in 2005. Besides, the Rolling Stones decide to put in a Rolling Stone blues cover at the end of this album. This album was released through Polydor Records. Now, when I did see Andrew Watt's name as the main producer for a lot of this album's entirety, I was really on the fence about it at first, because with his production on previous albums like the latest Ozzy albums of Ordinary Man and Patient Number 9, I was not keen on his production from those records at all, especially with the heavily auto-tuned, quantized direction on his way of production. But thankfully, his production work on this album is pretty good. There are two songs called Mess It Up and Live by the Sword that were done by Don Was, and the band decided to have those two as a part of this album because these two songs were the final songs that Charlie Watts was a part of before he passed away in 2021. And the drumming work on this album was entirely done by Steve Jordan, minus the songs I've just mentioned. The anticipation for the album is really high at the time for many Stones fans. And as you know that I have been a huge fan of the Rolling Stones, decided to review all of their albums despite the very cringe-worthy experiences of my early reviews of their earlier albums. With the whole discography, these guys have always been one of the greatest, released a ton of classic albums, especially through the 60s and 70s heyday. And to tell you the truth, I am one of these Stones fans that has been a fan of some of the later albums that not many people really cite as great albums or albums that they don't care for. For example, I am a fan of the Emotional Rescue record, to one of the later albums, Bridges to Babylon, and I also do think their Satanic Majesty's Request is a very underrated record. So if you want to see my reviews and also my ranking of the Stones discography, feel free to do so. With my experience around this album, I listened to it for the first time, and I'm going to be brutally honest as I want to for this review. This is the most overhyped album in their discography in terms of the latest of all directions for the band. But the more I listened to the album from start to finish, there are numerous occasions when some of these tracks have been growers with me. I don't agree whatsoever that this is the best Rolling Stones album in their discography. Blue and Lonesome, besides that one being a covers album, that had been one of my favourites. Like with the sound of this album, as well as a lot of the others put together, the Stones did sound very positive. They sounded really energized and full of this passion. They have always been true to themselves, even ones where they have tried with their experimental phases, like with Bridges to Babylon to Satanic Majesty's Request, as I've mentioned just over a minute ago. This album, in my honest opinion, is not all one of these albums that I would see as one of my personal favourites. I will go to the positives first off. The songwriting on the album is typically what you would want to hear and expect for the Stones. They have been really good tracks. Get Close, in my opinion, is a way stronger song than the first song and single called Angry. What is also impressive is that Jagger's voice has been incredibly aging as perfectly, and songs like Get Close, he really does shine a lot through his cleans and vocal melody to the vocal harmonies. Bite My Hand Off, featuring Paul McCartney on bass, that one is another one of my favourites as well. It's really dirgy in this slick bluesy territory. Paul McCartney's work around the song does give it a lot of the punch and the confidence it does make. It's one of my other favourites around this album. There's a lot of energy to the straight to the point attitude that it does continue to grow. Mess It Up is one of my favourites on the album. It's very funky, and when I hear Charlie's drumming, it still is a signature beat that no one can replicate. So I find with songs like Mess It Up, they have a separate spice. They have their own tonality. It's a really catchy song, especially through the chorus, where they can just all blend and connect together, as well as with the rhythm section through Ronnie Wood's playing. Bill obviously is not coming back to the Rolling Stones, but it's also brilliant to hear him do the bass lines for Live by the Sword, and Live by the Sword is one of the other favourites for me. So from Mess It Up to Live by the Sword, these two tracks are probably for me the strongest ones on the album, not just because it does have Bill on one of them and Charlie on both, but these separate songs are pretty perfect in through the catchiness and with the big hooks. The song Tell Me Straight is the only one where you hear Keith Richards doing lead vocals for, and out of all of the later Stones tracks with Keith doing the lead vocal duty, this one is excellent. It didn't drag on. This song has the perfect timing of the whole entirety of the structure, and Keith sounds, obviously being Keith, he has his own persona, his own personality. I really do love more of the repeating listens around this track, especially through the chords playing and the way the guitars were sounding, really fresh and clean, alongside with the whole melody around it, to another really good number of Dreamy Skies. Great set of vocal performances from Jagger. Driving Me Too Hard does feel like it's quite personal and full of honesty. A lot of the lyrics around this album do go through that similar vein, through something melodic, but it grabs a listener. It does touch a listener through the heart and the soul. Sweet Sounds of Heaven does feature Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder. While I'm not a fan of her music, Lady Gaga's vocals on this song, amazing. Spectacular range. Stevie Wonder's keyboard piano work adds his own fruition. I think Lady Gaga absolutely steals the show around this track. Besides, the song goes on for more than 7 minutes. I really like the ideas that Jagger decides to think about having some more different female vocals, especially live. These choices, now with Lady Gaga involved, could not have been just as surprisingly great. And to have Lady Gaga joining in with the Stones and company was a brilliant match that's been completely made. The Rolling Stone Blues cover, obviously originally by Muddy Waters, is a fitting track to conclude the record. So cozy and laid back, and hearing the acoustic vibe and the nature just around the very simple signature beloved structure. And Rolling Stone Blues, for me, was a really strong closing track. The negatives that I want to say around the album: I don't find Angry to be a strong opening track. The first time I listened to it, I was not really impressed with it. It's completely subpar and so repetitive over time when it was carrying on. Not one of those songs that does feel like a strong opener. And not gonna lie, the first time I had heard Jagger's voice on this song with Andrew Watt being credited as the producer, it was starting to really agitate me. I didn't like the way he edited Ozzy's voice from his latest albums, as I've said earlier, but I was getting a bit worried at first if Jagger's voice is going to be so synthetic. But Jagger's voice is still as real and as highly projected through the rest of the album. But anyways, Angry is not one of my favourites. Whole Wide World to me is a decent song, but it didn't really gravitate towards as one of the other favourites to the record's own continuation. It's, to me, a mediocre music that doesn't fulfill a lot of the strengths, as well as with some of the structures. The predictability is incredibly noticeable. At first, it did not feel anything new to me. It felt like a huge rehash. But the more I thought about it, yes, the Stones have done the same thing millions of times through multiple releases of albums. Having said that, if I want to hear the Stones in this signature, very similar, alike sound, what they did on this album, personally for me, I would like to hear the stronger material on the earlier albums. But like I said, there were Stones albums later on that I really do like. It's just that some of the songs on here are not all that perfect with me. Sweet Sounds of Heaven, besides the phenomenal performances, the song drags way too long. The 5-minute edited version of the song is better, I guess. But what is a negative around the song, because it's gospel influence, it's full of soul, I wished more of the saxophones to more piano or even some orchestra to rise the power of this song. It could have been a much stronger track to be a brilliant penultimate song to finish this record. I think this whole album is not all one of these highly strong efforts of material. Besides the negatives, I did enjoy the album better over time, despite the flaws that I've addressed. Overall, Hackney Diamonds by the Rolling Stones is, for me, a very solid record. It's not, to me, the Stones at one of their best strengths. It's not one of my favourite albums of the year. I just see this as above average at best. It was originally going to be a very mediocre to disappointing experience with a review that I was going to do earlier on, but I decided to sit back and listen to it some more, and I feel the better and the more the merrier feeling with this review of this album. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments down below. Do you like or even love this album? It's no surprise that many Stones fans cite this one heavily as one of their favourites, and good for you if you are one of the Stones fanatics like myself that does feel that way. I'm going to give Hackney Diamonds by the Rolling Stones a 7 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.